Engineer Marcus Webb and Valthari scientist Dr. Lissa Ventel were conducting routine orbital survey operations around the uninhabited planet Ceres 7 when their research vessel suffered catastrophic cascade system failure. What began as a minor power fluctuation in the ship's primary distribution node rapidly escalated into complete systems breakdown. Within minutes, navigation went offline. Life support began showing critical errors. Communications failed entirely. And worst of all, the geological survey data they'd been collecting revealed something their initial planetary scans had somehow completely missed. Ceres 7's planetary core was critically unstable, already beginning a massive tectonic collapse that would render the entire planet uninhabitable and possibly fragment it entirely. The ship's geological analysis systems calculated approximately 60 minutes until the collapse reached the critical threshold. After that point, the expanding debris field and violent gravitational disruptions would make escape impossible for any vessel still in orbit. Their ship, the research vessel Aurora, was their only means of survival, but the cascade failure had left it completely non-functional. Engines offline, navigation systems destroyed, even basic maneuvering thrusters were unresponsive. They were in temporarily stable orbit, but once the planetary collapse began accelerating, that stability would vanish in minutes. They needed to repair the ship. They needed to accomplish repairs in under 1 hour. And they needed to do it with severely limited tools, no available spare parts, and systems so catastrophically damaged that standard repair procedures wouldn't come close to working. Marcus was human, trained in practical engineering with years of hands-on experience, naturally good at improvising solutions using whatever materials were available, accustomed to working under significant pressure, but not usually with this level of immediate existential threat. Lissa was Valthari, brilliant theoretical scientist with exceptional ability to understand complex systems and identify root causes of catastrophic failures, but limited practical hands-on repair experience. Her species' deeply ingrained risk-aversion instincts made working under extreme time pressure physiologically and psychologically challenging. They'd worked together for 3 months on the survey mission. Professional relationship characterized by mutual respect, but they weren't particularly close personally. Different species, fundamentally different cognitive frameworks, different communication styles that sometimes created friction even when both were genuinely trying to cooperate effectively. Now they had 60 minutes to overcome all those differences and repair an impossibly damaged ship. Or they would both die when the planet collapsed beneath them. Marcus immediately began comprehensive damage assessment, moving through the ship's interconnected systems with practiced efficiency. The cascade failure had originated in the primary power distribution node, some kind of massive electrical surge that had propagated destructively through every connected system before safety protocols could isolate the damage. Navigation, engines, life support, communications, all fried by the same catastrophic cascade. We need to completely bypass the primary distribution node and reroute all essential power through the secondary backup systems, Marcus explained, already pulling access panels and physically examining the damaged circuitry. But the secondary systems were never designed to handle primary power loads. They'll immediately overload and fail unless we can substantially modify the power distribution protocols. Lissa was analyzing the ship's detailed schematics and system architecture on her portable terminal, one of the few systems that hadn't been connected to the primary node and had therefore survived the cascade intact. The theoretical load capacity of secondary backup systems is approximately 67% of primary operational requirements. We cannot sustain full normal power distribution, but if we carefully prioritize only essential systems, minimal life support, basic maneuvering thrusters, emergency navigation, we might achieve sufficient functionality for emergency escape trajectory. Might isn't going to be adequate. We need certainty about whether this will actually work. Absolute certainty is statistically impossible given our severe constraints. Optimal probability of success is the best we can realistically achieve. They were both technically correct, which was part of the immediate problem. Marcus needed to act decisively with incomplete information under extreme time pressure. Lissa needed to analyze thoroughly and understand all variables before committing to any action. Under normal operational circumstances, their fundamentally different approaches complemented each other effectively. Under a 60-minute deadline with a planet literally fragmenting beneath them, their different approaches created immediate tension. 48 minutes remaining. Marcus was physically rewiring the ship's power systems with brutal efficiency, bypassing completely destroyed nodes, manually rerouting connections through secondary pathways that were never intended for this purpose. It was inelegant, desperate engineering, forcing systems to perform functions they weren't designed for, creating jury-rigged solutions that might hold together just long enough for escape or might fail catastrophically. Lissa was simultaneously recalibrating the power distribution protocols at the software level, writing new code in real time to manage the completely non-standard configuration Marcus was physically creating, calculating load balances and failure thresholds as he worked. The starboard maneuvering thruster assembly is completely destroyed beyond any repair, Marcus reported grimly. We'll have severely asymmetric thrust capability. Navigation and course control will be extremely unstable. I can potentially compensate using modified thrust vectoring algorithms, but that requires substantial processing power that we're currently allocating to maintaining life support systems. Then we breathe slightly less efficiently and fly considerably better. That's not how biological respiratory systems actually function. It was a joke. Dark humor. Human stress response mechanism. We do that under pressure. Velthari generally find such humor counterproductive during actual crisis conditions. 30 minutes remaining, and they were encountering critical obstacles that threatened the entire repair effort. Marcus had successfully bypassed the destroyed primary power distribution node and established functional secondary routing. Power was flowing to essential systems at reduced but potentially adequate levels, but when he attempted to initialize the main engines, they remained completely unresponsive. The engine control circuits are physically damaged far beyond what I can possibly repair with the time and resources we have available, Marcus said, undisguised frustration evident in his voice. I can successfully route power to the engine systems, but I cannot make them actually fire and produce thrust without replacing critical components we don't have any spare parts for. Lissa examined the technical problem carefully. The control circuits regulate precise fuel injection sequences and combustion timing. If they're completely non-functional, the engines won't ignite properly, even with adequate power supply. I know exactly what they do and why they're critical. I need workable solutions, not technical explanations of the problem. I'm attempting to identify potential solutions. Your increasing emotional volatility is counterproductive to effective problem solving. My emotional volatility exists because we have exactly 30 minutes before this planet literally explodes, and our only means of escape has completely non-functional engines. They were both utterly exhausted, genuinely terrified, and working in fundamentally incompatible ways under extreme pressure. Marcus became more aggressive and action-oriented under stress. Lissa became more methodically analytical and precise. The intense pressure was amplifying their natural differences rather than helping them bridge the gap. 22 minutes remaining. The planet's surface was already showing dramatic visible signs of imminent catastrophic collapse. Massive seismic activity, clearly visible from orbit, tectonic plates, shifting with unprecedented violence, volcanic eruptions increasing exponentially in frequency and intensity. Wait, Lissa said suddenly. The control circuits regulate combustion sequencing because completely unregulated ignition would be catastrophically unstable and potentially destroy the engine. But if we're only attempting a single emergency burn for escape trajectory, we don't actually need sustained, stable combustion over time. We need one massive thrust event regardless of stability or efficiency. Marcus processed this rapidly. You're proposing we manually trigger the engines without any computer control whatsoever. Just dump fuel directly and ignite it with no regulation. The resulting explosion would be completely uncontrolled and would almost certainly cause additional damage to the ship's structural integrity. But if the only alternative is absolute certainty of death from planetary collapse, then a controlled explosion that might work is infinitely better than no thrust capability at all. Can you calculate the optimal fuel mixture ratio and ignition timing sequence that gives us the best possible chance of successful burn without completely destroying what's left of the ship? Give me 8 minutes for the calculations. You have 6 minutes maximum. I need at least 2 minutes to physically set up the manual ignition system. 14 minutes remaining before estimated planetary collapse threshold. Marcus had successfully rigged a completely manual ignition system, literally hot-wiring the engine's fuel delivery systems to bypass every single safety interlock and computer control mechanism. It was the engineering equivalent of deliberately removing all safety features from a massive bomb and hoping desperately you could throw it in approximately the right direction before it detonated. Lissa had calculated what she believed was the optimal fuel mixture ratio and ignition sequence timing. This approach will function exactly once. If the engines don't achieve sufficient thrust on the first ignition attempt, we won't have adequate time or remaining resources for any second attempt. Completely understood. Let's secure ourselves in the command seats and hope that whatever deities our respective species traditionally acknowledge are paying attention. Velthari culture is predominantly secular and doesn't typically. That was another stress response joke. Please just come on. They secured themselves in the command seats using the emergency restraint systems. The ship's navigation capability was still barely functional at minimal levels, but Lissa had managed to program a theoretical escape trajectory based on severely asymmetric thrust and completely uncontrolled engine burn characteristics. It wasn't elegant or particularly safe by any normal standard, but it represented their only possible chance of survival. 7 minutes remaining before critical threshold. The planet below them was now visibly beginning to fragment in real time. Massive sections of planetary crust were actively separating, exposing the superheated core material beneath. The expanding debris field was already reaching into low orbital zones. If we wait significantly longer, the debris field density will make any escape trajectory statistically impossible, Lissa stated with forced calm. Then we don't wait any longer, initiating manual ignition sequence. Now, Marcus triggered the completely jury-rigged ignition system. For 3 eternal seconds, absolutely nothing happened. Then the engines exploded violently to life. Not the smooth, controlled burn they were carefully designed to produce, but a barely contained detonation that slammed them brutally back into their seats with overwhelming force. The entire ship shuddered and groaned. Every remaining alarm system blared urgent warnings. Systems that had been barely holding together began failing catastrophically from the extreme stress, but they were moving, accelerating rapidly away from the collapsing planet at speeds that should have torn their improvised repairs completely apart, but somehow, impossibly, didn't quite. Lissa was desperately fighting with the crippled navigation system, attempting to keep them approximately on the calculated trajectory despite severely asymmetric thrust and completely uncontrolled engine burn characteristics. We're deviating 7.3 degrees from the optimal calculated trajectory. Doesn't matter right now, just keep us moving directly away from that planet. The violent engine burn lasted 43 seconds before complete fuel exhaustion forced automatic shutdown. They were coasting now purely on momentum, but they had achieved minimum escape velocity. Barely, but sufficiently. Behind them, Series 7 underwent its final catastrophic collapse. The planet literally fragmented, unimaginable tectonic forces tearing it into massive irregular chunks that would eventually form a new asteroid field. The debris field expanded outward violently, but they were just ahead of the leading edge, moving just fast enough to avoid being caught and destroyed in the expanding cloud of planetary fragments. 2 minutes later, they confirmed they were definitively clear of immediate destruction danger. The ship was barely functional, life support running on absolute minimum capacity, no remaining engine capability, severely limited maneuvering. But they were alive, and they were far enough from the debris field that rescue vessels would be able to reach them before their remaining systems failed completely. Marcus and Lissa sat in the heavily damaged command deck, both far too exhausted to move, silently watching the expanding debris field that had been Series 7 just minutes earlier. "We actually did it," Marcus said, his voice hoarse from sustained stress and physical exertion. We survived. Statistical probability of success using our approach was calculated at less than 30%, Lissa responded quietly. We substantially exceeded expected outcomes. You calculated only 30% chance of success and still committed fully to proceeding with that plan? The alternative approach had 0% probability of success. 30% is objectively and significantly better than 0%. That's actually a completely fair point when you frame it that way. They sat in silence for a long moment, processing what they'd just survived. Then Marcus said, I apologize for snapping at you repeatedly during the repair process. The extreme stress, the impossible time pressure, I wasn't handling the situation well. I also was not optimal in my communication approach. Velthari risk aversion instincts make crisis situations genuinely physiologically and psychologically challenging. I became excessively analytical precisely when immediate action was most required. We're alive specifically because you were analytical. That calculation about using uncontrolled engine burn, that idea saved both our lives. We're alive because you could actually implement the theoretical solution in physical reality. My theoretical knowledge would have been completely useless without your practical engineering skills and ability to work under extreme pressure. Another pause. Then Lissa said quietly, I have never trusted anyone with my survival the way I trusted you completely during the last hour. That level of absolute vulnerability is highly unusual for my species. Same. I mean, not the specific species-based part, but the fundamental trust element. We barely knew each other as individuals 3 months ago. And I just bet both our lives on your mathematical calculations and your ability to navigate using systems that should have been completely impossible to fly. Years later, when they told the story of surviving Series 7's catastrophic collapse, they both consistently emphasized the same crucial points. We had exactly 60 minutes, Marcus would explain to audiences. An impossible deadline, catastrophically damaged ship, and a fragmenting planet making successful escape more difficult with every passing second. We survived specifically because we learned to trust each other absolutely and completely under the most extreme pressure either of us had ever experienced. My practical engineering skills, combined with her theoretical knowledge and analytical capabilities, working together despite fundamentally different cognitive frameworks and communication styles. Neither of us could possibly have survived alone. The severe time pressure eliminated any realistic possibility of extensive debate or careful second-guessing of decisions, Lissa would add. We were forced to trust each other's specific areas of expertise absolutely, work in parallel on highly interdependent problems, and commit fully to plans with statistically unacceptable risk profiles, because the only alternative was guaranteed death. That shared experience created a bond between our species that decades of formal diplomatic negotiations could never have achieved. The planet was doomed in 60 minutes. Our only hope was repairing the ship in time became their story. Not just about technical problem-solving or engineering improvisation under pressure, but about how two fundamentally different individuals from different species learned to trust each other completely when survival demanded it. Sometimes the most important discoveries aren't about planets or scientific data. They're about learning that different approaches to problems aren't obstacles to overcome. They're complementary strengths that become powerful when combined through genuine trust and cooperation. Marcus had provided practical implementation skills and ability to act decisively with incomplete information. Lissa had provided analytical frameworks and ability to identify solutions others wouldn't see. Together, working under impossible pressure with no margin for error, they'd achieved what should have been statistically impossible. Not because they were exceptional individuals, though their skills certainly mattered, but because they'd learned in 60 desperate minutes to trust each other absolutely, value their differences as complementary strengths rather than frustrating obstacles, and work together toward survival rather than letting their different approaches create paralyzing conflict. The ship had been impossibly damaged. The planet had been literally fragmenting beneath them, and through desperate cooperation under unimaginable pressure, they'd survived.